Hey, what's up? It's Mike Squires, and this is Couch's Podcast, episode number 139. And my guest, Jeff Pilson, most well known for being the bass player for the best and classic lineup of Dokken, for being the sometime bass player in Dio with Dio and his band. Also, for the last many years, he's been the bassist and the musical director of Foreigner, which is also rad, and tons of other studio performing and producing gigs over the years. Most recently, he put out just this month, is December 2020, put out a record with George Lynch called Heavy Hitters, which is a collection of cover songs, very like unexpected cover songs given the hard rock and heavy metal treatment, which is very cool. There's some really interesting choices in there, which I'm a big fan of. If you know my taste in picking songs for Couchers videos, you know that this appeals to me, a great deal. And Jeff has a cool, interesting music history and a tie to Seattle, which I love. And so I had a great time talking with him. What a great player. I saw him play so many times over the years. And who knew he was going to be such a nice and cool dude as well. He also, along his wife has Hot for Yoga, where she teaches hot yoga and hot Pilates classes. He teaches he leads a guided meditation every Monday evening, 5:00. Let me make sure I got this right. I want to say 5:00 Pacific Standard Time. Yeah, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's a 30-minute class. Go to let's get this like semi-professional Mike Squires. Hot for Yoga scv.com. Hit that schedule button and go down to Mondays, every Monday evening. This is this is metal. Go get a meditation. This year you could probably use it more than ever. You know what I'm saying? This has been a tough year on everyone. So if that's something that's ever interested you, you could jump in with a familiar face. Go check out the Heavy Hitters album. I'll put a link down in the description of this video. Please subscribe, follow and subscribe to Couch Riffs if you'd like to get updates on future video performances and podcast conversations like this one. Thanks so much to everyone who supported me over 2020. This is the last episode of the year. This will go up on the 30th, so just 2 days before 2021 comes along. I don't think 2021 is just going to be, it's not going to go like this. The curve's not going to be super tight back up into like, let's go back to Candyland. It's not going to be like that. So you guys, hold on, hold your pants up. But 2020 has been an excellent opportunity for all of us to exercise patience. And I hope that you are learning and learning to exercise patience. If you didn't have any, I've certainly have acquired a lot more. So again, thank you to everyone who has supported Couch Riffs, who watches and sends messages. And thank you to folks who support who are patrons over at patreon.com/couchriffs. There are exclusive merch items that get sent out to patrons over there. You can download the audio for all of the Couch Riffs performance videos over there. That's the only place you can get those. And then I do some voting things over there. There's a bunch of other stuff over there. Go check it out. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to River City Guitars. River City Guitars, of course, I talk about always because they're big supporters of the podcast. I've known Bobby over there for many years, met him through business. He's a great, honest, fair guy. River City Guitars is always buying. If you've got some dusty old rig you want to move, you want to get rid of because it's just collecting dust, get a hold of Bobby. He's going to treat you fair. He's going to give you a good price. And I trust him. And I think you should too. The instruments should be played, not just sat in a corner and admired. You should be playing. And if you're not playing them, consider that someone else might really enjoy to play that thing that you're sitting on. And maybe you'd rather have the money than a doorstop. So River City Guitars, if you want to get a hold of them, you can phone them. Of course, let me look that up. You can phone them at 509-818-7693. Tell them Squire sent you. Or drop them an email at sales.rivercityguitars@gmail.com. Include a picture of what you're trying to sell. And again, tell them I sent you. They know me. We love each other. They're the best. Thank you so much. Don't forget the golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated, and don't be an asshole. It's a lot easier than being an asshole. Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. How you doing, Mike?
Excellent. Good, man. How's you?
Good.
You got a nice space there. Or is this your home space? Uh-oh, you froze up on me.
You just froze for a second. What'd you say?
Is that your home space?
This is my studio, yes.
Goals. Yeah, I need a space that's a little more
Electron in there.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
You gotta love that. And that's no plug-in right there, baby.
Oh God, no. I actually have a Chamberlain as well, but I've never actually had it in the studio. I bought it over a year ago and it's being fixed and still isn't ready.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have other vintage synths and stuff?
No. I used to have a Mini Moog and I got rid of it just because the tuning was so horrible. But no, I have a lot of vintage, mic pre's and mics and stuff like that, but I don't have any vintage synths, no.
Well, that Mellotron,
actually,
that's a nice...
I have, what's it called? I have an Echo, it's EKO, the brand Echo.
Oh, yeah.
Forget the name. String machine that I saw on sale for like $99, so I had to buy it.
Dang. Uh-oh. Yeah. I get this every time at the top, like your internet connection is unstable. And I feel like saying, well, join the group, internet.
Right.
Well, yeah, that's great. I'm so stoked to have you on the podcast. So thanks for taking time to talk to me.
Sure.
I spent the afternoon listening to the new record. The Heavy Hitters record.
Oh, great.
Sounds great. I love how what unexpected song choices there were.
Oh, well, thank you. Are we started, by the way?
I'm always recording from the top, so don't talk shit about anyone that you'll regret.
I wouldn't.
No, you don't strike me as the kind of guy that ever would. But yeah, I really enjoyed the unexpected nature of the song choices.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I was very, very happy about it. Part of the goal was to record songs that were hit songs.
Yeah.
But do them in, kind of our way a bit and, give them a rock interpretation. And so it was going to be unexpected because they were, like I say, we wanted big hit songs. This whole project started because George had a project and he needed to do a bonus track for it. And so the label asked us to record a cover version of the song Someone You Love by Louis Capaldi. Yes. So we did a version of that and it came out really great and we really enjoyed doing it. So that's when they said, hey, this is wonderful. Would you do a whole record of this? And so we did.
Did you track here at your space?
We did. Actually, George's guitars were some of the guitars were done here, but because we started just before the pandemic turned into a lockdown. But once it locked down, actually, George wanted to do all his tracks remotely. He was very cautious about the COVID thing. So, as we all were. But
sure.
So he actually recorded at his place. We figured out a way where I could run his Pro Tools rig with a program called Audio Movers.
Wow.
So that allowed me to operate his Pro Tools rig remotely. And we would record, we would do a Skype call to interact, and then I would share his screen through Zoom, and I would listen through audio movers through my system. So it was pretty cool.
Let me ask you this. What year did you make your first real record?
My first major label record was 1980.
And so when did automated faders come around, like flying faders?
They were around by then, but not everyone used it. They weren't as common as they became within 1 or 2 years. But by the early 80s, automation was full on in.
Can you imagine the technology that you just employed making this record in 1980?
Well, it would have been a lot harder. And I couldn't have imagined remote recording. We would have had no concept of that.
Right.
I mean, yeah, there was no internet that we were aware of. So,
that's amazing. I mean, I've had someone, operate help me set my settings and stuff, but never operate any of my software. That's great.
Cool.
I wish that now that I know that people can do that, I'm not going to bother making my own stuff sound terrible. I'm going to let someone else. But yeah, great job on that record.
Well, thank you.
Here's something that I didn't know. I didn't know that you have connection to Washington and to Seattle.
I do. I went to the University of Washington.
I love this. You were there before 1980, I'm assuming.
Yep.
So you were there in the music program?
I was a music major at the
Were you gigging as you were going to school there?
I was, well, partly yes. I mean, when I started off, I started very dedicated and all that, but then pretty soon I got sidetracked into being into a bunch of bands, and there was some gigging going on. Yes, there was. I did, like some cover gigs and some other stuff, but I was mostly in, band, I was still into the whole progressive scene at that point. And so I was playing in progressive bands that couldn't have had a prayer of doing a gig anywhere. Although we actually did end up doing one, but I was out of school by then.
Right. The music scene was decidedly different in Seattle at that time as well.
Yeah, it wasn't really a progressive scene. There was a slight progressive scene in the 70s. But it wasn't big enough to really be called much of a scene. But actually, right around 1980, the music scene in Seattle was pretty slow. It really was. That was one of the reasons why I ended up moving to San Francisco, because I thought it would be more exciting. And then I moved out of San Francisco to move to LA because that was the place where it was by 1983. So.
Were you studying upright bass and like classical?
I did. That was actually my major. It was. I mean, I never graduated, but that was my major, was string bass. And yeah, I was playing in the orchestra there and the whole bit.
Oh, that's great. Do you still have an upright, or do you still play? Or kept up?
I don't. And I mean, I can play, very rusty. I'm not good. But I've had occasion to play. We did a record a couple years ago where we Foreigner, where we covered "That's All Right" by Elvis, and I actually played an upright bass on that. So
that's great.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Now, that's I had an upright for a while, and it's a whole beast. It's a whole different.
I actually should have one. Honestly, I am so cramped. I mean, I have a drum room. And I have a separate ISO room. That window right there is an ISO room for guitars and whatnot. I don't know if you can see the window, but there's a window for my ISO room where the drums are. So I have ISO rooms, but I'm still, between all the guitars and everything and the gear, the space for a stand-up just isn't there. Otherwise, I'd probably have one because I love them.
We have an old farmhouse, and I don't even know. I can touch the ceiling. So.
And where are you at?
I'm in the Hudson Valley.
Oh, okay.
Of New York, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha.
But I've spent a lot of time in Seattle and grew up outside of Seattle.
Oh, where at?
Granite Falls. You know where that is?
No, but I've heard the name. I couldn't
Yes.
tell you where it is, though.
You know where Lake Stevens is? North.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where we would go grocery shop back.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, well, that lovely area actually up there.
Oh, beautiful. It's a great place to be from. And
Yeah.
I still have a lot of friends there, but
Sure.
there's a lot of opportunity for me to do, bad things there.
Bad things. Yeah, I got you.
So I'm glad that I got out of there. And yeah.
Gotcha.
Did you grow up in a musical home?
Not entire. I mean, my mom she was a big band singer in the 30s. And then she left that to kind of do the straight route and get married and have kids and everything. But yeah, I think she stopped singing right around World War II. But during the 30s, she was a big band singer for most of it, and she even made a record. I have a record of hers that she made in May of 1938, and it's really amazing.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
You've transferred, I imagine you've transferred that to digital and all that.
It was on a 16 RPM, and I had it transferred, yes.
16?
Sure, back then.
I don't think I've even heard
that
of
was before 78s even, yeah.
Right. Well, that's slow.
Yeah, it's real slow, which means it sounds horrible.
Well, you've got some digital skills. You can get in there and
well, yeah. I mean, we actually, I had it transferred to tape a good 20, 30 years ago, probably closer to 30 years ago. Yeah, probably. So it exists. And I'm not sure if I've Pro Tooled it since then. I can't remember. But anyway, yeah. But so, yes. So she was a singer. My real father wasn't trained at all, but he could play piano by ear. Like, he just had an ear, and he was just one of those guys. He could just play any song. If he heard it, he could just play it. Didn't have any training on piano at all.
Right.
But that was his thing. So they would be the couple at parties a lot that would entertain everybody. He'd play, she'd sing. But he passed away just a month before I turned 4, so I didn't get a whole lot of him in my life, unfortunately.
Right.
But my mom always had, the music. She had the musical talent and the music, the musical love, and I certainly grew up around music because of her. She was, we listened to a lot of music. I mean, she was from very much the white bread school, the Tony Bennettts and all that kind of stuff. She loved Edie Gourmet and all that, but she could sing that, and she could sing quite well.
That's amazing. So she was encouraging when you decided to pick up the bass?
She was encouraging when I studied music. I mean, she was a little freaked out when I left school because I wanted to play in bands. That was not her favorite moment of mine. But very soon after, she got pretty supportive and supported me in pretty much anything.
Yeah. Amazing. Why do you remember what exactly drew you to pick up a bass and not any other instrument?
I remember exactly. In 6th grade, a friend of mine and I used to, on the playground during recess, we used to sing this commercial. Everybody liked us. I was living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and there was this Graf's beer commercial, a root beer commercial. Sorry, it was a Graf's root beer. Don't remember how it went, but I remember that people would ask us to sing it all the time.
Right.
I don't know why. It was either clever or I don't know why, but they enjoyed us doing it. So it must have been funny or something. Anyway, and one day I was doing that on the at recess. I was singing this commercial with my friend, and some guys came out to me and they said, "Hey, we're starting a band and we need someone to sing. Would you sing?" And I said, "Sure." And they said, "And we don't have a bass player. Would you play bass too?" I said, "Sure." So I found out a guy that was selling a Gibson Skylark amp and a Tiesco Del Rey bass, and he was selling them for how much was it? It was $35 each. 35 for the guitar, bass, 35 for the amp. And I had a paper out, so I paid the guy $70, and I got my first bass and amp, and that was in May of 1970.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, the band never happened. But a year later, after that, we moved to the state of Washington. My family did.
Yeah.
And when we moved, I got very interested in playing bass because where we moved to in Washington, it was a small, like a logging town, lumberjack town with steel mill, with paper mills and all that kind of thing. And it was a very backward town to me. I had just come from a very nice suburb of Milwaukee that had really good education and everything. And so it was culture shock for me. I didn't know how to fit in or anything. So music became my salvation.
Right.
And so my junior high and high school years were spent in my bedroom playing bass, and that's how I learned.
Did you go down to Portland at all? You were
Sure.
close to Portland.
We were only about 50 miles from Portland. So yeah, Portland was the big city we would go to. That's where we went to concerts, and we would go to, there was this great record store. What was it called? Music Millennium, I think.
Still there, man.
Is Music Millennium is still there?
Millennium is still there.
Holy crap. That was like a big deal to go there. They had incense and they had, hash pipes and all that kind of stuff. And an amazing record collection. And my good friend Tim and I, he also lived in the small town that I did. We would go down to Portland, and that was a big adventure.
I lived in Portland twice, and Music Millennium has gotten a lot of my money.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we share a lot in common then. Although I probably lived there at a time where it was a lot less money to buy those same records, but
it was a lot less to buy a house there for sure.
Yeah, well, not anymore though.
No, forget it.
Yeah.
So when you were going down to Portland to see a concert, what kind of stuff were you seeing then?
Oh wow. Pretty much everything. I mean, we would, it was just the thing to do. Well, the first show I remember seeing, I don't know if it was the first show, but it was the first one that really stuck in my mind, was I saw Led Zeppelin at the Portland Coliseum.
Really?
And this was on June 17th, 1972, which is the day of the Watergate break-in. So I will never forget that I saw Led Zeppelin on that day, because I remember reading about Watergate the next day in the paper, and it was just a little article. It wasn't like a big deal. Nobody knew anything. They didn't connect it to Nixon or anything at that point. But I remember reading it, and I'll never forget thinking, wow, there's more to this than meets the eye. So even at 14, I had a sense about that.
So 14 years old, and you see Zeppelin. This is 72. 72 would be Led Zeppelin 4.
Yeah.
Woo!
Oh my God, they were at their peak. And a friend of mine and I, we brought in a little cassette machine into the show, and we actually made a tape of the concert, which I had for years, and it was incredible. I mean, because I listened to it a lot. Plant was singing just mind-boggling. I mean, he was hitting all the notes in Black Dog and all this other. It was incredible. It was really incredible. So yeah, that was a pretty life-changing experience. But I would see them bands like that. I remember I was also on. Do you remember the Raunch and Roll album by Black Oak, Arkansas? Their big live album that they had.
I never.
That's probably before your time. Well, Black Oak, Arkansas had this minute where everybody loved them, and they were cool. Yeah. And they did a live concert at the Portland It was actually recorded both at the Seattle and Portland Coliseum. Not Coliseums, Paramounts, the Paramount Theater in Portland and Seattle. And I was at that show, and I remember I was, I knew I was there when they recorded the live album, which is cool. But we would see everybody, whoever came to town. We would go. They had these cheap concerts, on Friday nights. Like I think. Yeah, K-San, I think, had Catch a Rising Star. I don't know if that was Seattle or Portland, but anyway, there was a lot of great concerts for cheap.
KISW in Seattle had the Rising Star concerts.
Okay, K-San must have been
so many cool. They were 99 cent. It was the 99.9 on the dial. So their shows were 99 cents, and there were a lot of great. I think Tom Petty did one.
Sure,
Benatar did one. Shit, AC/DC might have done one.
Yeah. Wow.
And this is crazy.
Yeah, I
But
remember
seeing Zeppelin at you were 14.
I was 14 when I saw Zeppelin. Yeah.
And at that point, I mean, when I discovered Zeppelin, they were already broken. They were over. You know what I mean? Like I was, by the time they were really when I was really aware of them, it's probably 1983.
Okay, sure.
I'm like 12.
Yeah.
Getting into rock music.
Right.
But at that point, it's all just lore and legend.
Yeah.
I mean, did you get the sense when you saw them in 1972 that they were like the band?
Kind of. I mean, they were definitely something that I was immensely drawn to. And then after seeing the show, now mind you, at the time, I was playing bass, and at the time it was very hard to hear John Paul Jones live back then because he would play those acoustic 360 amps.
Yeah.
And so he'd play with his fingers a lot. So in a big Coliseum, you really couldn't make out the bass very well.
They didn't have subs back then like that.
With that?
The sound systems were...
No, but I remember how massive it sounded. And, I remember when they walked out, I didn't even know it was Led Zeppelin when they walked out because we were told that Humble Pie was going to open, which didn't happen, by the way. But anyway, so at 8 o'clock, these guys walk on stage and I hear, I hear the snare drum a couple times. Like, wow, that sounds amazing. They're all playing with their instruments a little bit. And I hear Page playing, although I didn't know it was Page. And then all of a sudden, they go into breaking the Immigrant Song, and it was just so fierce. And you can even hear on the little tape that I made, you can hear me going, "Hey, that's Led Zeppelin!" I mean, because you didn't know what they looked like back then. I mean, I guess if I would have really noticed, Plant's hair, I should have noticed that, I suppose. Right. But I'd seen a picture of Steve Marriott where he had long blonde hair, so I just assumed it was him. But anyway, but yeah, what a mystique back then. I mean, the mystique of a show like that was so powerful. And I remember they did Stairway and they did an acoustic portion. I mean, it was just an insane show. It was amazing.
They had a lot of sort of, prog leanings, maybe after.
They had prog moments. Yeah,
got into it.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, and I loved that about them. Although when I did finally hear Chris Squire, probably shortly after I saw Zeppelin, when I first heard Chris Squire, and I heard that sound recorded on on an album, that was when I shifted immediately. I mean, it was a 180-degree shift immediately. I started playing with a pick. I bought a Rickenbacker. I played through 412s. I mean, I learned every note on every Yes album up to, I think, Going for the One eventually, but at that point it wasn't even out yet. So, I mean, I was a diehard Chris Squire guy from the minute I heard him. I mean, it was like instantaneous.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, if you are a young bass player,
sure.
What better role model to choose?
Sure. And he was so audible on records, where, you got to remember the technology was different. In fact, I didn't even have a stereo. I had a hi-fi. It was mono. It was but it was a beautiful old machine. I would love to hear that machine now because I bet it was a Magnavox, so it was probably decent quality.
Yeah.
But it had a 15-inch speaker. Well, no, it was probably a 12-inch speaker. But it seemed like a huge speaker, and it just rumbled, and it was like loud, and so. But like bassy basses, you couldn't really make out very well. But Squire, I could hear every note of his. So
such a honky, mid-range, nasty, growling.
Yeah, so growling. Yeah. That tone just, I was hooked immediately.
And so you were like, I'm done with all this nickel and dime rock and roll stuff. I'm going for the dollars.
I'm going for prog. Yeah, I had an EB3, a Gibson EB3 up to that point, and I remember as soon as I heard Squire, immediately I started bargaining to get rid of that, getting my parents to let me trade that in for a Rickenbacker, which I did, and it was just immediate. Like I say, I was so like, that's what I want to do. And I fell in love with Yes, and then I fell in love with Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, who I also saw in 1973. I saw them on their trilogy tour,
Right.
which was pretty amazing. And that was a change of life as well. So, I mean, I just became a prog guy, big prog guy.
Right. Did you get into like King Crimson and
Oh, absolutely.
Mahavishnu and
Absolutely.
all the way
Actually,
down?
I loved Mahavishnu.
Yeah.
And in fact, yeah, I had a band in the 70s where we were really modeling ourselves after Mahavishnu. We had an electric violinist.
Yeah.
He was amazing. I forget his name. I remember the guitar player though, because the guitar player was this total, like almost like a savant kind of guy. Brilliant guitar player. Didn't know a thing about any of the propers of technique or theory or anything else, but he could pick up a guitar. He could hear McLaughlin and just pick it out.
Right.
Amazing. He was amazing. So we had a band. It was called Zimfquidusman.
Could you please
just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Could you spell that?
ZMFQUADUZBIN.
Wow.
Zimfquidusman.
That is it backwards for something? Does it stand for?
No.
You guys are just like, let's make up a word.
No, Zimfquidusman was a planet in another solar system that worshipped the god Zimfquad. And actually, no, I'm sorry, it was not the planet. The planet was named Kreleiorizania. Krleorizania. Kreleiorizania was the planet. Zimfquad was the god. And so Zimfquidusman was worshipping Zimfquad.
And this was the concept.
Bad 70s Prague is what it was. and starting to experiment with drugs.
Smoking a lot of that ragweed.
A lot.
You got your tray and your record out and you're separating seeds.
Of course. My husband did a lot of that.
That's incredible. Were you guys full full cape mode?
No, because we never did a gig. We just did a lot of, as many bands did back then, a lot of rehearsing. But man, it was on fire. I mean, the electric violinist was on fire. The guitar player was amazing. My friend Tim again was playing drums, and we just had this crazy prog band.
And where was this? Was this in Seattle?
This is in a town called Longview, Washington.
Oh, this is in Longview.
Yeah.
Right. I know where Longview is. Yeah, that is I mean, you're just like right across the river.
Right across the river from Oregon, right? And like I say, 45, 50 miles from Portland.
Yeah. I've driven through there, a bit.
That's the song Longview by Green Day is about, Longview, Washington.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, crazy.
They went through there as well.
Well, yeah, not everyone passes through, but yeah. I love this. So you eventually you're like, all right, wait a minute. So to get some perspective, how old are you during this period, this prog? I can't even.
16. I mean, I think I heard Squire. I was 15 when I finally heard Squire. So that would have been, I'm sure it was well into 73 before I heard Squire. And, so I would say by the end of 73, I was a diehard proggy.
Yeah.
And the prog bands that I had, like Zimfquidusman, that was 74. Then I had a prog band called Christmas up in Seattle, and that was 77 and 78 and 79. So.
Wait a minute. Did you guys gig?
Christmas?
Yeah.
Christmas, there were a couple gigs, yes. Not a lot of gigs.
I feel like I remember from in the 80s watching all my VHS tapes that Motley Crue wanted to call themselves Christmas. And I have to wonder, I mean, because I've never heard that word before.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I joke. That's amazing. Christmas. I mean, at least I don't have to ask you how to spell it though, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yes, one notch better than Zimquidesman.
And if you need to shorten it for a bill or for a logo, that's already worked out for you too.
Yeah, exactly.
And an
Exactly.
X always looks great
Exactly.
in
Exactly.
a band name. I think actually that's a great band name.
I thought it was amazing. I loved it. Yeah.
Let me know when you guys do a reunion gig.
You know, the drummer wrote me not that long ago, so it's not entirely out of the question. And I had a really great conversation with the keyboard player like 3 days ago. So small world.
Great.
The Christmas reunion is in the works.
Christmas music.
Yeah.
You know, hashtag Christmas.
You know what's really
music.
funny about Christmas? And you'll love this. Speaking of cover bands. So we were one of those typical, bands that played our own music all day. So we needed to figure out a way to make a living. So we started a lounge band, piano, bass, and drums. And we were called the Merrymakers. And we would play like, Just the Way You Are by Billy Joel. And,
Yeah, but instrumental, like,
we would sing too. We would sing. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, rad.
Full on sing. And we did gigs as the Merrymakers. That's how we stayed alive to keep Christmas fed.
I love that. So on that subject, when was the last time you were like, all right, I don't have to have a paper route. Like, I'm not going to have a straight job. I'm doing this musically, or I'm going to eat out of trash cans.
Well, I remember the last straight job I had because I didn't have many straight jobs. I mean, I did have a paper route. I also worked in a music store for years, which is a wonderful experience because it was all throughout high school. I worked at this music store, and from the age of 15, the boss of the music store, he just loved me. He made me the manager of the music store because he had a day gig.
Right.
So he couldn't be there during the day. So I would ride my bike there after school and manage the music store. We had a guy that would work there from 10 to 2. And I learned how to do books, and it was a really fascinating experience for me. It was very, very helpful, very important in my development. But the last straight gig I ever had was in the summer of 1978. I had just moved to Northern California, and I was actually living with my sister in Petaluma, California, and I got a job at Wilson Furniture on Petaluma Boulevard in Petaluma, and I worked there for a week. And on the Friday, I remember they had me drilling concrete, and I don't know if you've ever done that, but that's a miserable gig.
It's the worst, and it tears your hands up too.
Oh my God, it was horrible. And I remember I did it for a couple of hours. I was just hating it. And right before 5 o'clock, in through the door comes this friend of mine who had asked if I would be interested in playing in a band, if they could get a gig together. And they found a house gig at a hotel bar that was nearby. He said, "We got the gig. We got the house gig there, blah, 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 blah." So I got to quit that day. And that was the last time I ever did a gig that was non-music.
Oh, that's great. Petaluma, there's a great vintage guitar store in Petaluma right now these days.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. And it looks like it's been around for a minute, the places that, I mean, it's just like there's guitars are this far apart from each other hanging on the wall. Still. And then also Mesa Boogie is there, right?
That sounds familiar. Although when I lived there, it probably wasn't.
So you're in Petaluma. Did you end up in San Francisco proper?
I did for a while. I lived in San Francisco for a while. Yeah, I mean, I kicked around a lot. I lived in San Francisco. I was doing this rock opera thing called Rock Justice that Marty Ballin from the Jefferson Starship had written along with a guy that was my manager at the time. And we were doing that, and we ended up getting a deal on EMI, and that was the first real record I recorded, was this Rock Justice record for EMI.
Where do you guys record that at?
At the Automat in San Francisco.
And when you walked in there, had you been in a studio to see other people record before?
I had been in studios by that point. Yeah, I'd done some. I left. I lived in. I came to Seattle. I came to San Francisco from Seattle in August of 78, but then I moved back to Seattle at some point late 79 and I stayed there for about 7 or 8 months. But during those times, I had been in real studios. No, I shouldn't say real studio. More like 16-track studios or an 8-track studio or something. Not a full-on. Automat was probably the most pro studio I'd been at that time. I'm thinking. I'd done a lot of recording at a place called The Church in San Anselmo, which had been a very active recording studio, like especially in the early 70s, like the Sons of Champlin had recorded there. Sly had done some recording there. It was a very cool place. And it eventually, they sold the recording equipment and they turned it into this big rehearsal complex where my band that I had soon after this rock opera, it was a band called Cinema, we lived in the studio and rehearsed in there. It was really, really cool. Really cool place.
Was when you first went into a studio and you watched the engineer and the producer, sometimes that person is the same person. Back then, not as much, right?
Sure.
Nowadays, but nowadays all bets are off. Like tradition is out the window. But were you automatically paying a lot of attention to what they were doing because you thought, well, this is something I should be learning? And
yeah. Absolutely. From day one. I mean, I was that guy that at 16 and 17 years old, I was playing one thing on a cassette machine and then recording, overdubbing onto the other cassette machine. And I had always been into that stuff. So recording was always a big thing for me. So yes, by the time I started recording, I was becoming a sponge. Now, I got to say, it took me a long while to really understand engineering because back then, you were a musician or you were an engineer. They were two such drastically different things. You respected the engineer, but you figured they would do the work. You didn't have to worry about that. That was the school that I learned in. So it took me a lot longer than I wish it would have to start paying attention to engineering things. I always just assumed that was out of my zone and, somebody else does that. And, so I didn't. But I paid attention to producers and I paid attention to production techniques and everything about overdubbing and doubling and just all the classic techniques were very, very interesting to me from very early on.
The sonic ear candy.
Yeah. All that. Right. Loved it all.
Were there any lightning bolt moments where something happened in that first session and you were like, holy shit, that's that sound that I hear on whatever record that you've grew up with?
I'm sure there were. I don't specifically remember. The one lightning bolt moment I do remember, though, and this is a little different than what you were going for, but I remember the first time I did some vocals, and this was at that church place. So this would have been 1978, I would imagine. And I remember putting on headphones and singing and just thinking, wow, it's so easy. And it was just, and the engineer, I know the engineer still, but the engineer was actually a very talented guy. He was right around my age, but he was very talented and he had been working there for a while. And it just, he got a really nice mix together. And I just remember thinking, this is the coolest thing in the world. And I also remember thinking, God, tuning it's so easy to hear pitch like this, which is so weird because most people have a hard time with headphones. But and I've had a hard time since then. But at that early stage, it was like really easy.
I still will leave one ear off or put an earplug in sometimes.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
What is that?
Well, I think it's that if you're hearing it through the bones in the body, you might be hearing that first, and then you can associate your pitch. If you're just hearing it in context, sometimes you don't have a point of reference as strong. That's the only thing I can kind of determine. I know it's a classic problem for a lot of people as far as singing in tune in headphones, but I've gotten pretty good at getting a mix together where even singers that struggle, I can get them to get pretty close. If I find the right mix for them.
Even on the occasions where I've performed with in-ears, I will usually wear one in-ear and, have one free with a
I've
wedge.
done that as well. But if you get a great in-ear mix, you
Yeah.
don't need to do that. But that's, a whole other level.
It's a whole, yeah, it's a whole other. Let's take a side note real quick. Was adopting in-ears hard for you as a bassist? Because
A little bit, yeah, because when we first got it, Foreigner, we were going to do a tour with Def Leppard in 2007, and they didn't have any monitors on stage.
right.
So it was like, okay, guys, time to make the transition. You kind of knew that was coming. It was sort of around the bend, obviously, but it was like, okay, now you got to do it. So when we first made the transition, we actually had a very good engineer. He was very, very good. But what he did was he, excuse me, and that was partly at my request. I was like, I told him, I said, look, I hate out-of-tune vocals. I just hate it. So just make sure that I can hear pitch. That's my number one thing. Because even though my bass playing is that's a bigger role for me in Foreigner than just singing, but I am the musical director, so it just drives me nuts when the vocals are out. So anyway, he was really good. He got it so where I could sing perfectly without having to worry about pitch, and it was all very there, but there was no power to the bass at all. So I thought, well, I guess that's what you just do. You just get used to that. But then we ended up a year or so later getting a new monitor engineer who said, no, we're going to make this really, you're going to be happy all the way around. Because I talked to him about this. And what he got me another driver in my in-ears, so I had more of a low end thing. Although I don't necessarily like a lot of low end in my in-ears because that'll throw your pitch off as well. But he got it so that the bass sounded incredible. It had air moving, so it felt like an amp, and yet I could still sing. So there's a way to do it, and yeah, it was a slow transition, but I would say within a year I was really, really into it and love it now.
And you guys were all pushing air. You had a live cabinet on stage.
Well, at first I did, but then very soon that went away because, hey, we don't need him on stage anymore. So that's when he really had to come up with a way to produce, to create that feeling. And that was with a sub that he had. It was a separate sub just for me, just so he could control the amount of low head I had in my ears, and I had an extra driver. So it really worked.
Have you seen these things? I'm sorry, we're like off on technological crap right now, but there's these some kind of, like drummers have those kicker throws, right?
But
they have these platforms that you like for bass players.
Oh, that's a brilliant idea.
And it vibrates. It's reactive.
That would be great. That's a great idea. I would endorse that. In fact, I might buy one.
If I can find the link, I'll send it to you later on.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So back to our normally programmed situation. It's where were we? 1980.
1980. Yes.
And you record the rock opera album.
Right.
And you get done and you're like, I'm going to be rich. I did it. I made it, Mom. Check me out.
Maybe a little bit of that. I mean, yeah.
It's pretty easy to get excited as a young person when.
Yeah, although I remember also being disappointed in the record even at the time, like things that I recognized that I didn't care for about it.
Right.
But yeah, of course, there's that youthful optimism, and you have people around you handing you drugs and telling you how big it's going to be. Remember, this is the start of the '80s. There was but I don't think it was a overly skewed mentality necessarily.
Yeah. And then how quickly did reality come around on that?
Very quickly, because then I remember, the album died. It didn't do anything. I remember the first single came out, and I remember just being really excited. And I remember Val Garay mixed the single, and I remember I had heard the rough mixes, and I thought it was like real mediocre. And then when Val Garay mixed it, it was like, wow. And that's when I realized, wow, that's what a mixer can do. Made it just sounded like a record when he did it. But then, when it all died and didn't do anything, there's that discouragement that happens, and that realize that you have to accept that not all things make it. You gotta, so you gotta get really clever, and or really lucky or something,
Right.
But the drive was still so strong at that age that, it didn't really deter me much.
You're at this time 18,
I'm
20,
22 in
22.
1980. Yeah, by the time that record came out, I was 22.
Right. I remember every record I ever made. I thought, well, here we go. Like this is it, right? You have to believe that, right? You have to.
To a certain I mean, you have to have that enthusiasm, absolutely, and you have to have that drive to make it.
Otherwise, why get out of bed and go do it?
Otherwise, why get out of bed? And it's not going to be great unless you really put yourself into it. That's
right.
It's just part of it. Although I don't think you need the emotional attachment to believe that it's going to be successful. I think you need the emotional attachment to believe that it's possible, is what you need. But if you give, best not to get too caught up in all that.
Yeah, of course. No, that's a slippery slope that can lead you down some dark alleys when it.
Yeah, and I've been down those dark alleys, so I get it.
Yes, same. Yeah. So what was the rock opera when I think of rock opera, I think of like a lot of dramatic changes. Did that record like key into any of your prog stuff?
Only like little tiny bits. By then I prog was so not cool by that point that I kind of had to let go of a lot of it. The band that came out of that though is after the album came out, I continued gigging with that outfit, but we ended up bringing the keyboard player for Christmas. Ended up moving from Seattle down to San Francisco to join that band, and we did start having more proggy kind of elements in it. And then he and I joined up with a guy by the name of Randy Hansen, who was also from Seattle that we knew from the 70s in Seattle, and Randy had moved down to San Francisco because his manager was the guy that owned the Automat, David Rubinson, at the recording studio, and it was also a recording complex. So we formed a band with Randy then, where we did half Randy's songs and half my songs, and my songs were pretty progressive, fairly progressive. They were rock, hard rock, but with progressive elements. And that we started doing that. That was about 82 that we were gigging around San Francisco.
Wow. Randy did an in-store 6 years ago at a guitar store where I was teaching at.
Wow, and that's in upstate New York?
In Seattle, that was. I've only been out here for 5 years, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, in Seattle, sure. You know what, Randy, phenomenal guitar player, phenomenal performer, tremendous human being. I mean, I'm still real close with him. I mean, I love him to pieces. We had such a fun time being in a band together. Unfortunately, it was 1982.
Right.
And there was still the whole stigma in LA, there was the skinny tie, knack wannabe kind of bands and all that kind of thing. So it was very, very difficult for a rock band. And we were in San Francisco, had prog elements. So, I mean, we couldn't have been more unhip if we tried.
Right.
And so, we didn't get a deal. And that's why I ended up moving to LA in 1983. Got
it. And did you immediately land the Dokken gig?
It was after a few months. I had a cover band for a while. I had a cover band with Paul Taylor, who ended up going into Winger years later. He and I were roommates, and we had a band. Mark Nelson, who is now the vice president of Roland, like a big shot at Roland, but and still one of my best friends. Great, amazing drummer. And Amy Cannon, who ended up marrying Mick Mars and being one of the Nasty Habits for Motley Crue years later. So we had this wonderful cover band. It was actually really good. And that was the cover band I was in when Dokken came to see me and decided to pluck me out of that.
Huh. And so you're in LA for just a matter of months, and Dokken has a deal or doesn't have a deal
Dokken
yet?
had a deal. Yeah, no, they had a deal. When they contacted me, it was August. I moved there in March, and then yeah, I moved to LA in March of '83. Played in one cover band for a while. Then later in the spring, I did this cover band I was just telling you about.
Yeah.
And the Dokken guys, I joined Dokken in August. So
Yeah.
they had a deal. The record was soon to be released in America, but it was just before the record was recorded. But we did the first video together, and that was in August of '83.
And God, what a time, 1980.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. LA was so exciting at that point. Moving to LA was so much fun. I
Right.
mean, it was rock band heaven.
Right.
You know,
So
you had
you
Rainbow and
are once
Emerald
again
and everything.
just the whole thing,
Yeah,
everything that, yeah.
yeah, everything I wanted was there.
Right. It's funny how what you want can change when the things are still around.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So once again, you're faced with this this is it. Like, here we go, the rocket ship, and you guys,
With Dokken, you mean?
yeah,
Well, I mean, you know what's funny is I didn't when I heard the first record, the first Dokken record, I didn't think it was all that great. I mean, I thought there was some good stuff on there, and I thought the guitar player George Lynch, I immediately tuned into him and said, "Wow, he's great."
sure,
I thought the record was kind of mediocre, to be honest with you. I did think "Breaking the Chains" was a great song. I really did, but I didn't necessarily think the record was going to do what. I mean, at that point, right when I had joined, Rat wasn't out yet, but Motley Crue was out, and they were starting to make some noise. And Quiet Riot was out, and they were doing big guns by then. But I didn't necessarily think that. I mean, I was kind of like, whatever happens, happens on the Dokken thing. I didn't necessarily expect it to go big guns right away.
right. Uh, I love that you're like, it's okay, but I'm going to join this band anyway. This is a good opportunity.
Exactly.
Right.
And it was $125 a week.
Hey, that's more than I've made at different times in my life, and working full time even.
Yeah. And, listen, and obviously Don was really smart. I could tell he was very smart and knew the business well. And then when I played with George and Mick, I mean, I just fell in love with them as players, and we bonded instantly. So yes, I was joining for the opportunity, but I really did enjoy the lineup. I really did.
Well, I saw the band a lot. I mean, you guys worked a lot.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you guys were arguably one of the hardest working bands through the entire 80s.
Well, we always called ourselves the premier opening band of the 80s. Because we played with just about everybody and opened up for just about everybody.
Well, it was always.
Seattle at the time?
What's that?
You were in Seattle at the time?
I was indeed, yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so I saw you guys with Aerosmith, and
yeah, I remember that well.
Saw you guys
with... that was my birthday.
Is that right?
Aerosmith, in January of '88.
Yeah. Was it January '88 there?
Yep.
Saw you guys with Priest?
That was in '86. '86, yep.
And saw Monsters of Rock.
That was summer of '88.
And one other show, I swear.
Dio, did we play? No, man, I don't think we did play there with Dio. Seattle. Oh, I don't know. There's Sammy Hagar, there's Kiss, there's so many people that we played with in the 80s, but somebody.
It was perfect timing for me. I picked up the guitar in 1985, January 85 or 86.
There you go. There you go.
I got a guitar for my birthday. And so, yeah,
your 14th birthday.
What's that?
It was your 14th birthday.
It would have been my, I think I got it for my 14th or 14th. Yeah, you're right.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm just gonna defer to you. on any timeline questions with my life from this moment forward. Uh, but the band appealed to me straight away because for the same reasons that Prague, that Chris Squire appealed to you as a young person, I was, I wanted to, shred, but I realized pretty quickly that I, even with as much dedication that I had, like you can't, to play decidedly technical music, you have to have more than, to excel at it, you have to have more than dedication. There's some extra stuff that you just innately
I suppose yeah,
because believe me, I practice my ass off.
Good man.
For whatever it ended up getting me, but yeah, it was always a real pleasure to see you guys play. I was always very excited when you guys were coming through, and from the first to second records and moving forward, each one really was like songs, sonically, musically, everything was a huge jump forward. And I definitely, I think that you are a huge part of that.
Well, a part for sure. I mean, it was a good chemistry. We had good people around us. We had great management. That even though they were very hands-off management, which maybe wasn't good because we were such a combative band, but they were really good about putting us with the right people. And we got to work with great producers and great engineers, and Tom Werman, Roy Thomas Baker, Jeff Workman, Neil Kernan, and Michael Wagner, Wynn Davis. I mean, all these wonderful, wonderful people. And again, and by that point, mind you, now, I was definitely like, someday I'm going to be a producer. I want to be a record producer. So it was in the back of my mind at all time during those records.
So you're paying very close attention at this point.
I am. And in fact, when we went in, the first record I did with Dokken was the Tooth and Nail record. And, Tom Werman and Jeff Workman were the producer engineer. And we clicked with Workman right away. And we actually clicked with Werman right away. But when we got into doing vocals, Werman started off and did a couple songs with Don, and they just didn't have a rapport. They didn't have a chemistry. So Werman, after doing 2 songs, he looks at me and he says, "You know what? You produce the vocals. I'm out of here." So he would go upstairs and hang out, and Don and I would do the vocals with Jeff Workman, the engineer. And it was, I mean, I got to say, I think I was ready for it at that point in my life because I was definitely a student of the recording process and art. And, I was a professional by then. I knew what I was doing. But it was still that was still being thrown into the deep end.
Sure.
But you know what? It really worked. And it kind of gave us a flagship destiny for the whole thing. As we formed how we recorded. And I think that is one of the reasons why we got better from record to record, because we wanted to expand on that.
Did you get a co-producer credit on that record?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have even thought of that back then,
Right, of course. Do you think that it helped getting that experience first, working, like producing vocals with Don, because you guys were familiar and you had a familiar language already from being in the practice room, that helped? Because
probably
working with vocalists that you don't know very well, it's working with other musicians can be sensitive, right?
Right. Well, plus he knew I could sing, and he had respect for me, so that helped. Yeah. And I had a lot of respect for him, and a real I always considered myself a big fan of Don's voice. So I always thought that put me in a position where I would have a good judgment of when he was nailing it or not. That just kind of, and pretty soon I got to know him real well and knew when he wasn't giving it his all, or when he was capable of something else. And so, there was a lot. But listen, Don rose to the challenge a lot in the 80s. He really did. I mean, we threw some difficult stuff at him to sing sometimes, and he came through, which which was one of the very, very pleasant surprises as the band progressed. Because his voice, if you listen to it on Breaking the Chains, and then if you listen to it on Under Lock and Key, he's come 1,000 miles, and that's only a couple years difference.
Right. That's some high singing. We did Alone Again on Couchress once, and I had to sing it, and I can't sing it. I cannot sing it. Not well. Man, that,
it's up
and
there.
it's also pretty like,
Well, try singing the song Unchained the Night on the Under Lock and Key record. That's
no way, man. Yeah, no way, man. So at this point, you're like, I'm in this, of course, 110%, but as you already stated, like there's some turmoil. You're like, if this comes to an end, I have a path. Like I have a vision.
Well, it's slowly started. I mean, I will say the first few years of the band, we started to get, even though there was a lot of turmoil, you could feel the momentum of the band, and that was really important for me. I wanted to take that further, and in fact, in '85, Quiet Riot had offered me to join their band because Rudy was leaving, and I actually turned them down, and they actually offered me a pretty substantial amount of money, but at that point, number one, I wasn't a huge fan of Kevin's voice. I mean, I love Frankie's drumming, and I love Carlos is one of the greatest people on the planet. But I wasn't a huge fan of Kevin's voice, even though I was a friend of Kevin's and liked him personally quite a bit. But I knew that it would be hard for me to really get my heart and soul behind the band musically. And I had a lot of faith that something was going to happen with Dokken. So for those first few years, it was feeling a strong momentum. Now, having said that, you could sort of see the long-term writing on the wall, even in earlier days. And, we used to talk a lot about, George Mick and I doing another band with a different singer. And I started writing, by the mid-'80s, I was writing songs with my friend Michael Diamond. And he and I always fantasized about a band, because Michael played bass, where I'd sing, he'd play bass, George played guitar, and Mick played drums. That was our fantasy band for a long time. And then when Dokken did finally break up, that didn't come to pass for various reasons. But that was when I went out and ventured off and did my own Flesh and Blood, which became War and Peace. Right.
And how long? I know that you also toured with Dio.
Right. And I first joined Dio in '93 and did the Strange Highways record, and then we did a record called Angry Machines in '96. So I was with Dio for those records. I toured in late '93 and '94. I toured with Dio. The end of '94 is when I left Dio, because that was when Dokken reformed, and Dokken did a record called Dysfunctional. But I stayed real close with the Dio guys, and Ronnie was a dear friend. So he asked me to play on that album, Angry Machines, in '96, and then he also asked me to play on what turned out to be his very last studio record, which was Master of the Moon in 2003.
One of the, one of the all-time greats.
In every way, human being as well.
When I met him, only one time, but the circumstances under which I met him were pretty outstanding, because there's no reason it should have happened. I was working when I would come home from tour. I would usually have a coffee job, but I also did some local crew work. So I'd load people in, and I loaded his show in at the Showbox in Seattle.
The Showbox. That was the one place that Christmas ever did a show, by the way.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think that was in 1978 or 1979. Anyways, sorry, I digress.
That's amazing. No, I love that. No, that place is legendary. It's been around forever. Yeah. They almost tore it down recently, and
I thought I heard something about that.
The Seattle fought like hell to save it, and they saved it.
Great. Yeah. So Ronnie was loading in at the Showbox.
Well, I was loading in with a local crew, and stuck around and watched the show, and then load everything out and just sort of. And he went around and shook every person's hand and said thank you.
Yeah.
Like he walked around the club and thanked every person for doing a job to help make the show happen. And I was just like,
Yeah, no, they don't get any better than that. Listen, he used to every night after the show, we would leave the bus parked backstage, and there would be a huge line all the way, around the bus and down the block or whatever. He would stay out there till 1, 2 in the morning, whatever it took, and sign every single thing that people brought. And, a lot of times, and he didn't rush them through. It wasn't like, yeah, okay, now, he wasn't like that. He would talk with people. He would remember things. Like, he wouldn't necessarily remember every fan's name, but he would see somebody and go, hey, wait a minute. Your dad was sick. How is he doing? And, the fan would just look shocked that he remembered and say,
right.
Oh, he's doing okay, man. Wow. But that was real for him. He was really like that.
I mean, that at that point, he's like 20 years into a music career.
Well, when he's signing autographs with me, 94. Yeah, I mean, 20 years into being a recording artist, he had been playing music since the early 60s,
Why am I thinking? Did he play trumpet on a famous recording?
I don't know about a famous recording, but he was a trumpet player, and he played on an American Bandstand tour where, Jay and the Americans and Lou Christie and a bunch of these early 60s artists would play, and he was the trumpeter in that band.
I love that.
Oh, and then who is, I'm spacing now, but I just heard this story recently, but Dion, Dion and the Belmonts, Dion DiMucci, that's his name.
I don't know.
I believe it was Dion that would call Ronnie in the bus, and he'd say like, "Hey, Ronnie, come here," because he knew he could sing, even though he's the trumpet player. And he'd say, "Sing this part for me," and they would go back and forth so he could practice harmonies and stuff. And that's kind of what encouraged him into being a singer.
Oh, that's amazing.
And when they would do, like, it was like a school bus back then. It wasn't like a tour bus. It was a school bus. And these people would, they'd sleep on it, and that's how they'd go around.
That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
So through the 90s, did you start making records with other people? When was the first time you recorded someone else's band and you were like,
I was doing that in the 80s even still. I mean, but yeah, in the 90s, I got pretty serious about it. I mean, early in the 90s, I played on the MSG record, the last MSG record, Macaulay Schenker Group. And that was James Kotak and I. It was really fun, too, because Michael was really, really focused at that point, Michael Schenker. Yeah. So it was just incredible. We used to have so much fun jamming, and it was just so great.
I saw him just a couple years ago, still fucking incredible.
Oh, he's a genius. He really is. He is absolutely a genius. And that was where I cemented my friendship and longtime association with Robin McCauley. But then we also, in 92, after my band War and Peace had broken up, they called me because they were going on the road acoustically. They were doing shows acoustically. And Spence from the band Shark Island was playing 12-string, the other acoustic guitar with Michael, and doing the background vocals. And it was just Michael, Spence, and Robin going around doing this tours. And then Spence had to do something, so they called me very last minute. They said, "Hey, we only got 3 days. Can you come in and do this?" And I said, "Absolutely, I'd love to." So it was really great for me because, the way I look at it, that was like getting 12-string guitar lessons from Michael Schenker, because I was learning all the parts, and some of them are very difficult dexterity-wise, and just playing that, learning that, and getting that all together, that was so good for me, and such a wonderful thing, and it made me love doing acoustic stuff ever since.
Right. And 12-string is real bear to wrestle.
Well, it can be, yeah, and especially when you're playing Schenker stuff, because
Yeah.
he is not afraid to stretch his fingers for
Right.
chord changes. Yeah.
So you said that you recorded other people's records in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, I produced other things. I remember Don Dokken and I produced a band in the earlier '80s. They were called Antics, and
With
actually,
an X, I hope.
was it? Of course.
Yeah.
And as I recall, somebody spoke to me about that record not that long ago. I haven't heard it in probably 35 years, but anyway, and who else did I record in the '80s? Wow, spaced it now. But certainly by the '90s, I was, yeah. I mean, I had a home studio. It was a 12 track, but I had a home studio in the place I was living then.
12 track.
An Akai 12 track. It looked like a beta tape, but it would have 12 tracks on it. And it was such, I remember George Lynch and I got one of the very first ones, and we wrote the song Dream Warriors on it. That was the first thing we ever wrote on it, which would have been in '86. So they must have come out in '86. And it was just so amazing. You had 12 tracks. Up to then it was only four. We'd only had four to mess around with. It was insane. It was just so insane to be able to, have 12 tracks, and you could double things, and it was just, you could leave the drums alone. You didn't have to bounce. You did have to bounce, but
you could get away without it. Yeah, I mean, you could get away with it.
I would always bounce background vocals, but I had a method where I could, bounce the background vocals and make them sound great on 2 tracks, and so it was such great prep work for going into a 24 track, So yeah, by the '90s, I had that 12 track at my home. I even had for a while where I could sync 2 of them together, so I did have 24 tracks.
Wow!
Although the technology was so primitive back then that it was very unreliable and kind of a big pain in the ass. But did do a lot of recording. I'm having a hard. I mean, I know some of the like localish kind of bands I worked with in the '90s. Not anybody you probably would have heard of, but I was doing a fair amount of recording. I mean, I love.
Yeah.
Mostly my own stuff, though. I did a lot of recording of my own stuff and bands I was in at the time.
That's great. I mean, what better way to work the kinks out? Yeah.
Incredible education, really. I've had a very fortunate set of circumstances for learning.
That's great. And I asked earlier, but I don't know if I caught it. Is your recording space here at home?
This is connected to my home, yes.
That's great.
Yes. Love it.
That's the goal.
But I mean, I'm able to do drums. I'm able to isolate amps from the drums, and so I have 3 spaces, which is wonderful. And yeah, and I have it set up so that it's quick. Nothing bothers me more than the delays in a studio for technical reasons. And, when you want to get an idea down, you want to get it down.
Yeah,
it's pretty set up for that.
For sure. And so you did this last record here, mixed it here as well?
And now which one? Oh, you're talking about the heavy hitters?
Yeah.
No, it didn't. It was mixed by a guy named Jesse Ray Ernster.
Okay.
I don't consider myself a mixing guy, really. I mean, I can, but I find other people do it better, and so why not? And Jesse Ray just did an incredible job on this record.
Yeah, it sounds great.
He's like a pop mixer, so he really does things with that kind of sensibility, and yeah, he's just fabulous.
So on that subject, there are some there are like real, like I was saying earlier, what seems like pretty oddball song choices for you guys, know, but they're hit songs. Were these songs that you guys picked because you liked them? The only quote that I really found was George kind of saying like, yeah, I don't really like Duran Duran, but this is a good song, essentially, right? Like it's an undeniably good song, which I would agree with.
Sure.
But are there any of these songs that you're a fan of, that you like?
Oh,
Are
I
you an
love all
REM
of them.
fan?
No, not particularly, and that's actually not one of my favorite. Actually, no, I do like that song. But no, that's not really the reason we did that is because it seemed to echo how we all felt at the time. This is
Sure.
as the pandemic's coming around us. But for instance, we did "You Got the Love" by Rufus, and that was a song that George and I have always mutually loved and talked about and tried to rip off in various ways over the years.
Right.
So when we knew we were doing a covers record, like, well, we just have to do that. And then Mark Tureen came in and killed it, just slayed it, which was perfect. So, but most of the songs we kind of wanted to balance it out. Some 90s, some 80s, some 70s. Did a 50s song. We did, Lucille by Little Richard.
Yeah.
And then some current stuff, well, not current, but
Yeah.
21st century stuff.
It was the Madonna song, right?
Yeah, music. We did music by Madonna and "Apologize" by One Republic. So we kind of wanted to stretch a whole long period of eras together and just kind of thread them together with the way we played them.
Yeah. No, it's great. I really, really, really love it.
Oh, well,
I'm super excited. We're not going to talk about it in detail. We're not going to talk about what it is exactly, but I'm really excited about the video that you're going to work on. The song that we talked about.
Yes. Why can't we talk about it? It's a big secret.
Well, it's going to be, the release will be a surprise, that it's a secret. Okay. I never announce what the songs are until.
Oh, that's right. You did tell me that. That's right.
We'll talk about this one detail at a time when it's difficult to even get people to pay attention to a 2 or 3 minute video. And why, like, I am just as pleased as a pig in shit, Jeff, to be doing this and to have you involved as I'm very happy. So
I'm looking forward to it. I really am. I
should have something for you. I mean, without giving up the goods here, like there's a lot of advanced work that has to go into it.
And I understand, and especially when you describe how you're doing it, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, these things are really fun, and
I can't wait, man. Can't wait.
It's a pleasure to someone who I have admired and saw play a lot. I'm excited to have you in a video. So thank you.
Thank you, man. It's like I'm honored to be on.
I think it's late out here on Sunday night. This is gonna be the last podcast of 2020, which is pretty great.
Yeah. My 2020 wasn't. I have to say, I know a lot of people had it really rough, and I feel bad for a lot of people. And there's been some horrible things that have happened, but I gotta say, it's been nice being at home with my family. So I try to be grateful for that. It's been great being in my studio. Not only did we do this Heavy Hitters CD, but George and I also recorded another End Machine record that's going to come out in April. That's already recorded, mixed, and mastered. So that's getting ready. And we're going to do videos at the end of January or February at least.
Oh, great.
So there's another End Machine record that we recorded during this. So had a lot of really productive recording time. And then just being home for a year, I've really tried to be grateful for that. Because like I say, I know a lot of people have it really bad. And our crew has had it really bad. That's one of the reasons why we're trying to raise money for them. If you go to foreigneronline.com, we have some online auctions and we have some packages together, and all of that is to try and raise money for our crew, who through no fault of their own are out of work for a year, and so we're trying to do what we can to help them out. And so if people, I know a lot of people can't, and no one would expect otherwise, but if you have the means and are able, that would be so wonderful if you could help our crew out, and go to foreigneronline.com and get some cool stuff while you're at it.
I'll make sure to plug that at the when I make my intro at the top.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's cool.
I don't know if I told you this, but I'm creating the video performance for hopefully for Roadie Relief, which is an organization.
Oh, for roadies.
Roadie Relief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh wow! No, I didn't know that. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll be doing some good while we have a lot of fun.
I hope so too. Well, let's just promote the heck out of it.
Well, one more question for you.
Sure.
Are you a yoga practicer?
I am.
Are you doing hot yoga?
No, that's my wife's. Her yoga studio is called Hot for Yoga. What I am doing there, however, well, she does have some online hot yoga classes. She also has online hot Pilates classes. I've been doing the hot Pilates because I do practice regular yoga myself. But what I've also been doing on Monday nights, I've been doing a meditation class virtually, which is at hotforyogascv.com.
We'll plug that up at the top too.
Great. And yeah, I do a 30-minute meditation class on Monday nights, 5 p.m. Pacific, so 8 p.m. Eastern.
And let me ask you this. I take it that you haven't always been a meditating yogi, probably not through the 70s and 80s.
Safe to say.
That you have this in your life right now, and 2020 came along and smacked us all. You're probably like your ability to be grateful for what you have and to be at home with your family is probably enhanced by this. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's been a good year for reflection, and yoga has a reflective aspect to it, and certainly an internal search engine in there. And it's been great for that. So yeah, it's kind of helped guide me through all that nicely.
Yeah, good deal. Good. I did hot yoga for a couple years, and I hated every minute of it, but it was one of those things where I just
feel great afterwards though, don't you?
I always felt like I was going to throw up afterwards, and we would walk out of a class and my wife would be like, "I'm hungry, let's go." And I'm like, I feel sick to my stomach. I was a lot more fit at the time. So if I tried to do it now, I would probably pass out, but it's definitely time for me to get back on the mat.
Start with regular yoga first.
Yeah, get back on the mat. I like flow better anyway.
Yeah, I that's kind of the personal way that I go. I love the stretching aspect. The relaxation and the stretching is so wonderful.
Right. Well, the rest of your lifestyle, are you like vegan? Do you do any of this?
No, I mean we try to be fairly pescatarian in this house.
Mm-hmm.
We all like fish. Our daughter is a pescatarian. My wife and I will eat meat or chicken occasionally, but we eat very, 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 very little of it. Pretty much the only time we have it is when somebody's like, "Oh man, you got to have a bite of this."
Right.
That's about the only time. Well, but we definitely like our fish and our vegetables here and our fresh fruits, and we try to eat pretty healthy here.
Yeah, we're not big on red meat around here either.
Yeah, I gotcha. Plus, my wife teaches 7 days a week, and hot yoga, hot Pilates.
Right.
And she's in incredible shape. So yeah.
We have our upstairs bathroom. We have a humidifier and a heater up there so that my wife can do her practice. So it's
very nice.
We're making it work.
She does hot yoga.
Through the pandemic, yeah.
Great.
She's making it work through the pandemic.
Great. Well, good for her. That's good.
I'll like I said, I'll plug Hot for Yoga and I'll turn my wife onto it as well.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. Yeah. That's fabulous. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks so much for spending so much time with me. I really appreciate it.
Mike. Really, really fabulous podcast.
I'm going to be talking to you hopefully in the next 2 weeks. You're going to get the drums done first, and so this one is going to be particularly, as you know already, challenging. But
can't wait.
I am just the kind of jackass to try and pull this off.
Love it.
So yeah, man, thank you so much. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you as well.
And
yeah, we'll talk again, I'm sure.
Keep killing it. I'll talk to you soon.
Man. Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate it, Mike.
Bye.
Bye bye.